I'm clear that the Labour Party's position at the moment is opposition to a second independence referendum. John McDonnell has got far more priorities as an incoming Chancellor of the Exchequer to deal with than rerunning a referendum that only took place in 2014. So I'm pretty clear, and I think John McDonnell's pretty clear, that the priority of an incoming Labour government will be to resolve austerity, will be to start investing in public services, will be to change the way the economy works, and to try to tackle whatever situation we find ourselves in with Brexit.
Well, let's speak to Shadow Scotland Office Minister Paul Sweeney and Scottish Labour MSP Neil Findlay. He, of course, quit recently as the party's Brexit spokesman in Scotland. Good morning to you both.
Hiya.
Good morning.
Neil Findlay, do you have a problem with anything that John McDonnell said?
No, not particularly. I think John and Richard have been saying that what we need is a Labour government to invest in public services that the SNP are taking apart, a Labour government to end poverty in Scotland and across the UK, and a Labour government that will reform the state. So I think both of them are saying exactly the same thing in terms of the need for a Labour government.
But I'm talking specifically about the idea of a second independence referendum.
Well, I think
John McDonnell seems to say that actually the UK wouldn't block it. Richard Leonard says the party policy is to say no.
Well, I think John McDonnell said yesterday that the priority for Labour would be bringing in a Labour government to introduce those policies that I've just mentioned, and that is exactly right, and I am 100% agreement on that. Now, if you're asking me about my position in terms of second referendum, I don't want a second referendum. I would campaign against it. I would campaign against independence as vociferously as I did the last time. However, if there's a majority in the Scottish Parliament and parties have stood on a manifesto saying that they will have a referendum, and if those parties get a majority, then I think it's just democratic to say that they would then be allowed to negotiate with the UK government to have that referendum. Now, as I say, I would oppose it vigorously, but I would have to say one final thing on that, Gary. I think in that process, any negotiation that they had would have to come back to a confirmatory vote of the Scottish people. And as I say, I don't want that referendum, but I would campaign against it.
But that, of course, Paul Sweeney, is not Labour policy at the moment. The Labour policy is to say no to a second independence referendum. John McDonnell went off script, didn't he?
Well, it's to say no to a Scottish independence referendum because there's no mandate or no desire from the Scottish people to have one. And what we've said and what John has said is that in future there may well be a situation where that changes, but it's not in any way foreseeable.
No, that's not what he said. He said he would not block a second independence referendum. Richard Leonard's position, the position of the manifesto that I presume you stood on, was to block that, was to say no to it if there was a Labour government.
Yeah, he said in future if there were a mandate for one. There isn't a mandate for one.
So you would have a different manifesto next time round? The position would change?
No, the position's not changing. The position is basically that if there's in future a decisive mandate, i.e. if a majority of Scottish MSP stand on a manifesto that's very decisively and clear as a critical campaign issue that they want a second referendum on this issue, and it delivers a majority of MSPs in the Scottish Parliament on that basis very, very explicitly, then it's very difficult.
Well, that's what they say they are at the moment. They say that there's a majority for independence in the Parliament at the moment, and ultimately the Scottish Parliament has backed the idea of putting this back on the table because circumstances have changed. So does Labour now support that?
No, because it's not a mandate for one, because the Scottish Green Party didn't stand on a manifesto commitment to deliver one, and the Scottish National Party buried it very deeply in their manifesto, and it was never a feature of the campaign in 2016. It was also based on a hypothetical scenario of leaving the European Union, which wasn't at that stage a fact, and it has to be a post-facto clear mandate that's a central issue of a campaign, and then there may well be a consideration that it's a legitimate mandate to do so.
Douglas Alexander said yesterday at Neil Findlay that John McDonnell's comments were strikingly ignorant of history, ignorant of Labour's electoral interests north and south of the border. The reality is that this has driven a coach and horses through Labour's position on a second independence referendum, hasn't it?
Well, I don't think it's. I don't think it has. I think there's a, in terms of what the UK Party want to see, and what Richard Leonard and I and Paul and others want to see, is a Labour government come in and reforming our society, reforming our economy, and reforming the state. And so I think there's absolute unity on that.
But independence is one of the defining issues of Scottish politics, and Labour doesn't have a clear policy on that anymore.
If you let me finish, Gary, John McDonnell was expressing his personal opinion. He's perfectly entitled to do so.
He's Shadow Chancellor.
Just as I am, and just as Paul Sweeney is, and the difference is in the Labour Party, people are allowed to have an opinion, unlike the SNP, where it's Nicola Sturgeon's way or no way.
But is that good enough when it comes to an electoral position on a binary issue, Paul Sweeney? Because the issue that is deemed to have been a problem for Labour is sitting on the fence over Brexit. If you're sitting on the fence over the issue of Scottish independence, that's going to lose your votes, isn't it?
No, because it's exactly why Scottish politics is in the rut it is, because we're insistent on the sycophantic approach to dealing with the SNP as a binary issue over independence. And actually, I don't recognise it, and I thoroughly reject the idea that it's a yes-no question. Actually, what Labour wants to achieve is...
Opinion polls tell us, and we just saw the opinion poll the other day, that actually the country is divided very much down the middle on this, as it is with Brexit. And when you don't have a clear position on Brexit, you pay an electoral price, as Labour has seen. Likewise, the same would be true of Scottish independence.
No, because I think Scottish Labour's position and the Labour Party as a whole's position reflects the majority of public opinion in Scotland and the UK, which is actually that they wish to remain part of the United Kingdom, but wish to see it decentralised, further reformed, and actually see a radical retransformation of the UK, which is exactly what the Labour Party wishes to achieve in government. And that's why we have our own radical and visionary approach to doing this, which we presented to people in our next manifesto. And I'm absolutely confident that people in Scotland will vote for the Labour Party in large numbers and deliver a large swathe of Labour MPs in Scotland and help form the next Labour government in the UK to deliver a radical transformation and federate the United Kingdom. And that's exactly where the majority of Scots are.
Do you want the next manifesto to say no to a second independence referendum, or do you want the next manifesto to say, as you've pointed out, if there's a majority for it in the Scottish Parliament, then Labour would say yes?
The next manifesto will present Labour's vision for transforming the UK. And
I'm asking you specifically about the issue of independence.
It's not a campaign issue for the Scottish Labour Party. What we'll do is present our vision for the future transformation of the United Kingdom. We expect the Scottish National Party to support our proposal for a referendum on that. And I hope you'll invite the SNP in to say if they'll back our position in our manifesto, because we're only one of the ones that are going to form the next Labour government, aren't we? And they're going to form the next UK government. And I hope the SNP will be prepared to back Labour's plans for constitutional reform across the UK. And I hope you'll drag them in here and insist that they back the Scottish Labour Party and the Labour Party as a whole across the UK to form the next Labour government.
Everyone is welcome to come on the programme, to be honest, if they want to be interviewed. Neil Findlay, is this part of a strategy to do a deal with the SNP? Is the reality, as we've been hearing on the programme, that actually potentially Labour in London feel that SNP MPs are more likely to be helpful to them at Westminster than expecting a majority of Labour MPs to win in Scotland?
Gary, I have to pick you up and say no one is sitting on the fence in this issue. Absolutely across the board, no one wants an independence referendum. That's absolutely clear. So in terms of, I think you're alluding to coalitions and pacts and the like. John McDonnell was emphatic yesterday, absolutely emphatic. I was at the event. I'm afraid you weren't. He said no deals, no coalition. That was absolutely emphatic. That is the position. Could not be clearer.
And if there was another independence referendum, how would you vote, Neil Findlay?
How would I vote? Yeah. I would vote against independence. Gary, I probably did more public meetings than any other politician. I did 65 public meetings arguing against independence. I will argue against independence as vociferously the next time. I want to see a federal UK with devolved power coming to Scotland and across the regions of England and across the UK. That's what I want to see. That's what I argued for.
And that, of course, should be a question in that any referendum in future. It shouldn't just be a binary referendum, and we'll be back in that option.
I agree.
Okay, gentlemen, thank you both very much for your time this morning. That's the Labour MSP Neil Findlay and the Labour MP Paul Sweeney. The time is 8:21.